Sometimes in the process of making videos for this channel, I come across stories that for whatever reason don't quite make the cut for their own dedicated video, but are still really intriguing nonetheless. I figured why not start the year off with something a little bit different. I hope you're ready for a triple bill, because today we're covering 3 unsolved animal mysteries. Approaching the grandiose estate of Overtoun House in Scotland, there lies a bridge. A bridge that has attained a rather gruesome reputation. Reportedly in the years since 1950, over 300 dogs, compelled as a consequence of some unknown force, have thrown themselves over the parapet and into the chasm below, a sheer drop of almost 60 feet. Could there be a reasonable explanation for these incidents, or is something much darker at play? Overtoun House itself was completed in 1862, commissioned by an industrialist called James White and built on land previously occupied by a farm. The infamous bridge in comparison was constructed over 30 years later by White's son, a Mr. John Campbell White, as part of plans to make access to the newly renovated property much easier. It seems that the estate and accompanying bridge had a rather inconspicuous beginning though. First used as a family home, it was gifted to the people of Dumbarton in 1938 and has served many purposes since, becoming a home for injured soldiers during World War II and a maternity ward in the years following. The troubles wouldn't first start until many decades later. The precise number of dogs who have gone over the edge is uncertain, varying wildly depending on who you were to ask, with estimates as high as 600, leaving multiple animals severely injured or even dead. In researching this case, it became immediately apparent that many of the details here are fuzzy at best, but although no one seems to be quite sure how or when it first started, it is undeniable that something odd is happening here, with there being a number of well-recorded cases of such incidents. In 2004, Kenneth Meikle was walking his dog, Hendrix, when they attempted to jump. Luckily, Hendrix survived the high fall, but was understandably traumatized. Events like this are common enough that the bridge itself has gained the nickname of the Dog Suicide Bridge, for fairly self-evident reasons. It's perhaps unsurprising then that a place as unsettling as this has earned a reputation for being a conduit for the supernatural, if you were to believe in that sort of thing. There are those who claim that the house itself is haunted, patrolled by the ghost of a woman called Grace Eliza McClure, the wife of the first Baron of Overtoun, John Campbell White himself. The so-called White Lady of Overtoun is said to walk the grounds, and I guess that would include the occasional stroll down to the bridge. Quite why the lady of the house would feel compelled to forego her peaceful afterlife in favour of persuading local dogs to jump to their doom off a bridge is quite lost on me, but then again, I'm not exactly a paranormal expert. For what it's worth, the current owners of the house, American pastors Bob and Melissa Hill, do not believe the property to be haunted. But they have, however, reported sightings of tall ghostly figures that they consider to be angels. So make of that what you will. Others have suggested that it might not be the house itself that is the cause of the strange events at the bridge, but instead that the estate and surrounding area could be situated on what's known as a Finn place. So according to Celtic lore, a Finn place is an area in which the boundary between the spiritual world and our own is dramatically diminished. It's proposed that this would allow spirits or beings from the other side to pierce the veil in a sense and have impact upon our own mortal plane. To go further, many people hold the belief that animals, especially our canine companions, are more in tune with these forces than we are ourselves, having the ability to sense things that may pass us by. To be fair to these people, it is certainly true that many of a dog's senses far exceed the capabilities of our own, with the ability to hear a wider range of frequencies and pick up on scents undetectable to people. It seems that many of the locals in Dumbarton hold some sort of belief in the spiritual, with a number of those interviewed in reference to the bridge expressing it in one way or another. A local self-published author by the name of Paul Owens went as far as even writing a whole book on the subject, with his conclusion being that after 11 long years of research, the bridge must surely be haunted in some way. With all that said, There is one glaring problem with all of these theories: their strong reliance on the supernatural, which is based far more on belief and anecdote than any hard evidence. So approaching the mystery from a more scientifically minded perspective raises a number of interesting challenges. For starters, it's not known if a dog could even understand the very concept of suicide. It is true that animals are known to grieve in a similar manner to people, and that dogs are also known to suffer from anxiety among other mental illnesses, but at present there is no evidence that a dog would be capable of taking its own life purposefully. So it would be pretty safe to conclude that when the animals are making the leap, they're not doing so with the intention to end it all. There have been some more official investigations into the bridge, with researcher and dog behavioural expert David Sands brought in to give his analysis. He proposed that the dogs were being driven to jump due to a number of differing factors that blend to create the perfect storm at this particular spot. For one, a dog's perspective on the world is greatly different from our own. Being far lower to the ground, their view of the bridge and the surrounding landscape would be notably different. It is possible that due to the low angle and the covering of vegetation on the walls of the drop, that it may mislead the dogs into believing that the drop itself isn't nearly as far. On top of this, since the majority of the dogs which have jumped from the bridge happen to be long-nosed breeds, it could be that a particularly alluring smell is overexciting the animals. In a brief test conducted by Dr. Sands, a series of odours from animal species found to be inhabiting the local environment were laid out in containers in a field. Then, a number of dogs were one by one let out into the field so it could be ascertained as to which smell they were most attracted to. When the experiment was concluded, they found that 7 of the 8 dogs tested were most attracted to the scent of mink. So putting that together, the theory being that the dogs are attracted by the smell and unable to properly see the steep drop, make the jump, and it's only after they've committed to it that they become fully aware of their mistake. If you were to ask me, this theory does seem to make a lot of sense, although there has been some pushback from locals around this idea, mostly regarding as to whether any minks actually live in the area. With that said though, this is the only proposed theory that has any real evidence backing it up. But whatever the case, it's undeniable that the mystery and the bridge itself has gradually crept its way into the realm of urban legend and certainly makes for an interesting story. Oh, and if you were to visit the area on a Sunday afternoon walk, it's probably for the best to keep Fido on a lead, you know, just in case. Imagine you're a rancher. One morning you wake up and get ready for work, the sun is shining, there's a cool breeze in the air, and in every way it seems like a morning like any other. That is until you go to check on your cattle. The corpses you find are bizarre. The animals' tongues, eyes and ears removed, along with their sex organs and udders. Large, almost surgical looking cuts dot the body, and a pungent, ostensibly medical odour fills the air. Mysteriously, for such a gruesome attack, there seems to be a total lack of any spilled blood. No footprints can be found in the immediate area, not even the cattle's own, and all the usual signs of predation or opportunistic scavengers are absent. Sure, it's not unusual to lose cattle every now and then, but never to this extent. What could possibly have done this? How did these animals die? This horrific scenario, or a version of it, has been faced by numerous ranchers worldwide, and have been noted in all kinds of animals, from cattle to sheep and horses, pigs and goats, even the occasional unlucky dog. Although similar tales have been spoken about for generations, they weren't widely reported outside of cattle raising communities until 1967, when the story of a mutilated horse, misidentified as Snippy, it turns out she was called Lady, made national headlines for the strangeness of the case. Found one morning with her head and neck devoid of skin and precise cuts across her body, something had killed her during the night, even though there were no footprints or tracks nearby. She displayed all the typical characteristics of one of these unexplained mutilations, and set in motion quite the uproar. In the years following, the number of reported cases of such incidents would continue to grow, peaking in the mid to late 70s when, according to some estimates, over 10,000 cattle nationwide had been maimed under uncertain circumstances. This was more than just sheer tabloid fodder. To the ranchers of America, this had become a real pressing issue. After mounting pressure on the federal government, an official investigation was launched, eventually headed by the FBI. Their final report, published in June of 1980, concluded that the mutilations were predominantly the result of natural animal predation, but did go on to acknowledge that a small sample of cases had anomalies that couldn't be explained through conventional wisdom. So that's it, right? Nothing out of the ordinary here. Well, for many, the report felt like a grand dismissal of the problem. The sheriff of Elbert County in Denver, a Mr. George A. Yarnell, perhaps sums up the general feeling the best. He's quoted in the New York Times as saying, "I've been around cattle all my life, and I can sure tell whether it's been done by a coyote or a sharp instrument." One conspiracy theory suggests that the US government itself was in fact involved in a number of these cases. Depending on the source, this was for everything from experimental weapons testing to the clandestine tracking of the potential spread of mad cow disease stateside. In Cache County, Utah, a group of ranchers had organized armed patrols to keep a lookout for a series of unmarked aircraft that were routinely surveying the area. 2 local police officers also claimed to have had a heated altercation with a number of men in an unmarked US military helicopter at the small regional airport, after which the incidents of mutilation were said to have stopped in the area. Hey, and if we're talking about conspiracy theories here, why not touch on the elephant in the room? The all too common explanation for the strange and unexplained, the supernatural and aliens. There's no getting away from the fact that many people believe these cases to be the result of alien experimentation. I mean, if we go back to the case which originally brought widespread public attention to these incidents, that of the mutilation of the horse misidentified as Snippy, but actually called Lady, you'll find reports that within 24 hours of the incident, many people, including a local judge, had witnessed a group of 3 orange rings flying across the sky in formation at incredible speeds. Yep, for many the incidents are irrevocably linked to alien activity, whether that is in any way possible to prove or not. Another popular theory at the time was that the increase in mutilations were the result of purposeful human intervention, possibly due to cult activity. This would explain the surgical like cuts, the removal of organs, and the fact that many animals seem to have been drained of their blood. It's worth noting that during the 70s there was widespread public concern over the growing impact of cults across the US. So in keeping with this, in 1975 the ATF launched an investigation into the link between the incidents and potential cult activity. Although they recorded a number of unusual incidents and amassed some circumstantial evidence, it was not enough to warrant further investigation from the agency into the matter. The FBI had also considered this a possibility when in the process of their investigation, but were also unable to compile appropriate evidence to link the mutilations to deliberate and planned animal sacrifice. However, a smaller state-level investigation in New Mexico reported that they had found evidence that some animals had been tranquilized and treated with an anticoagulant before their death, which is not only terrifying but seems like an awfully human thing to do. At this point you might be thinking the same thing I did. Wow, a lot of people have spent a lot of time and money investigating this, and yeah, you'd be right. This was a real concern at the time, and disturbingly these incidents are not confined to the past, with notable cases occurring as recently as 2019. And as tempting as it is to latch on to one of these less conventional explanations, there is a fair amount of evidence supporting the idea that the majority of these cases are down to natural processes. Most of this boils down to the idea that the animals died of natural causes, and then the mutilation occurred after their death as the result of known terrestrial, so not aliens, phenomena. The missing body parts could be the result of small scavengers and bloatflies along with other parasites. Vultures and other such carrion birds could fly in without disturbing much of the surrounding area to scavenge the soft meaty parts of a body. The absence of significant blood could be explained by pooling in the lower areas of the torso that happens once the heart stops beating. The surgical like cuts, well, once the animal dies, significant bloating occurs internally, especially if it's left out in the hot sun. With time, the body splits from the buildup of pressure, creating what appears to be long and purposeful cuts, not unlike those that would be made with a blade. An experiment conducted by the Washington County Police Department validates a lot of these ideas. They left the recently deceased carcass of a cow in a field for 48 hours and recorded the process of decay. By the end of it, their cow closely matched a lot of the reported cases, surgical-like incisions and all. With that said, it is difficult to write off all of these cases as simply being the result of natural causes. A post-mortem carried out on a mutilated 11-month-old bull in New Mexico resulted in some disconcerting findings, with the heart and liver both having gone completely white while resembling the texture of peanut butter. On top of that, samples from the liver were found to contain 4 times the normal level of phosphorus, while at the same time being completely devoid of any copper. Oh, and blood from the animal was a strange off-pink colour that wouldn't clot for several days. None of the laboratories which examined the samples were able to come to any firm conclusions on a cause of death, and yeah, I can see why, because that's all pretty weird. Okay, so trying to put all that together, You could argue that some of the more grotesque cases have to be the result of human intervention of some kind, while the majority could simply be caused by natural phenomenon. Agricultural historian Michael Goldman has also suggested that the spike in reports during the 70s could have been spurred on by mass hysteria caused by pressure on the struggling cattle industry and general discontent amongst small ranch owners with the government at the time. So if you combine all of those factors together, you've got yourself something that sounds a little bit like a fairly reasonable explanation. Sometimes with these cases, a singular hypothesis begins to present itself, one that makes the most sense and explains away a lot of the stranger details. Other times, however, you might come away with more questions than answers. Where this falls on that spectrum, I'm not so sure. Evolution has led to some truly bizarre body plans, many of which can still be found on display in the animal kingdom today. I mean, just look at the giraffe. But perhaps none quite as peculiar as that of Tully Monster, or to his friends, the Tully Monster. A creature so strange that even 60 years after its discovery, paleontologists still aren't quite sure what it's meant to be. First found in a fossil bed in Illinois, known as the Mason Creek Formation, its discoverer, a man called Francis Tully, for which the creature is now named after, was left suitably perplexed. Unsure of what he had unearthed, Tully would take his monster to the Field Museum in Chicago in hopes that they would be able to classify it, only to find that they were just as puzzled by the specimen as he was. The body plan of Tully Monstrum is unlike that of any other animal known to exist, past or present. The creature ranges in size from about 8 centimeters in length all the way up to around 35 to 40 centimeters, with its elongated body tapering in on both ends, on one side resulting in an extended proboscis tipped in a jaw-like structure containing a small row of sharp teeth, and on the other, a pair of vertical fin-like appendages. In between the two ends, you'll find an odd bar-like structure with what appears to be eyes on each extremity. Although it's commonly depicted as having its fins in a vertical orientation with the eyes on top of what you might describe as its head, the overall orientation of the animal is still up for debate. Tully Monstrum also possess structures that have been interpreted by some researchers as gills, and another that seems to resemble a notochord, a structure similar to that of a primitive spinal cord. The main body and its appendage may also have been segmented, but like almost everything else surrounding the animal, this too is up for debate. The formation the Tully Monster was discovered in can be dated back to around 308 million years ago, giving us a reasonably good idea of when it would have swam the depths. Surprisingly, fossils of the creature are remarkably common, but only within the Mason Creek Formation itself, making it the only known location in the world in which specimens can be found. As for its lifestyle, it's proposed that the creature was carnivorous and free swimming, using its proboscis to either dig through the seabed in search of food or to catch smaller organisms. And honestly, that's pretty much all that can be properly agreed upon surrounding how it may have lived. The real controversy surrounding the creature relates to its phylogeny, or complete lack thereof. Phylogeny is the relationship a creature has to its ancestors and descendants. Essentially, what did it evolve from and what's it related to? As of yet, it's still unclear as to whether Tully Monster fits into the evolutionary record, though that's not for lack of trying. In 2015, some researchers completed a study in which they analysed thousands of examples of Tully Monstrum, and concluded that it was a vertebrate, that being an animal which possesses a backbone or spinal column of some form, and was likely an ancestor of some of today's jawless fish, like lamprey. So case so right? Well, only a couple of years later, another group of researchers took a pass at the fossils themselves, and came to the exact opposite conclusion, classifying the Tully Monster as an invertebrate. And here lies the problem. No one can seem to agree what kind of animal the Tully Monster was. So much so in fact, that Tully Monstrum has joined the ranks of other such unclassifiable animals, in the hopefully temporary scientific category of Problematica. Yes, that's a real thing. Never let it be said that paleontologists don't have a sense of humour.